Hello, you multi-mellow muchachos, and thank you to Foxman Noir for that malt mention. Welcome, all you whisky-curious quality spirit adventurers, to my channel called Ralphie.com, where I review quality spirits in my tranquil, otherworldly, off-grid environment called the Bothy, the Manx Bothy, somewhere in the middle of the Irish Sea. And I've just lit my little lantern candle, right, so to keep the bad spirits away and encourage the little angels to come and join us, so they can get a little bit of an angel's share of whatever spirit I happen to be reviewing, which in this instance is Kilkerran, non-age statement, heavily peated, single malt whisky. Oh, could you excuse me? You coming in, sweetheart? You coming in? You come to say hello to the viewers? No, he's just, the cat's just standing outside, waiting for mice, but thinking I might have a treat. There we go. Back to the review. I am organised, by the way. I'm thinking, hang about, have I introduced the whisky or haven't I? Have I shown the Pat Pals and the malt mates the label of this whisky? Or should I just kind of actually just read a wee bit off it? You know, not the flannel, but the practical information. But it's mainly practical information anyway, so here goes. This is, as I mentioned, the peat's really coming out to meet me in this one. It's heavily peated from Kilkerran, which is Glengyle Distillery. So this is one of the rare occasions where the name of the single malt is different from the name of the distillery, and it's all to do with copyright and intellectual ownership issues. And to be honest, Kilkerran sounds better because we've got plenty of Glen single malt whiskies. It's bottled at 58.4%, and as it says in the back of the label, it's not chill filtered and there's no added colouring, which is all good. It also says that it's batch number 8. So we've already had 7 previous batches, and this is batch number 8, and the little pink round addition there is confirming that in the UK this is customs and excise tax duty paid. And like many non-age statement heavily peated whiskies, you tend to have a lot of phenolic, intact, spirit-driven engagement, because over time, when a whisky's maturing in oakwood in the warehouses, you tend to find that the phenolic component, being a very pungent long chain molecule, it breaks up as part of the maturing process. And it's amazing how quickly an intense phenolic peaty whisky can over time become softer and softer, and then you're left with nothing more than a lingering sense of smokiness in the background. But of course, in conjunction with an age statement, it's used to justify some very hefty prices, which in my opinion are just not worth it. And I've tasted some really old Lagavulins, 30-year-old, 25-year-old Lagavulin, and frankly, I wasn't impressed. And I wasn't impressed particularly with 30-year-old Laphroaig either. I think peated whiskies work best when they are young and elemental, and that's what we have here. And it's also an endorsement to the fact that not all peated whisky comes from Islay. So there is a lot of options out there beyond the reputations of Laphroaig, Ardbeg and Lagavulin, which are the main 3 prominent peated whiskies from Islay. And it's actually nice to get a change from Islay peat, because they tend to use that salty maritime peatiness, so you often get a familiar peatiness from different brands simply because they come from Islay. And most of the Islay distilleries get their malted barley from the Port Ellen maltings. There you go. Not all. Bruichladdich doesn't. It's an obvious exception to the rule. But this is absolutely delightful. I made comment earlier just how the nose was coming out the glass to meet me as soon as I poured it. And one reason for that is the high strength at 58.4%. So the more alcohol in it, the more the alcohol can hold on to not just the complexity of flavour, but the intensity of flavour as well. And particularly with peated whisky, people like that blast. They like that elemental nature. And you're definitely getting it loud and clear here. Over and above the fact that Glengyle is the sister distillery of Springbank. And as such, the quality of production at Glengyle Distillery of Kilkerran is as good as what is made at Springbank. And not many people seem to have connected the two as thoroughly as they should do. So what have we got in the nose? I'm settling down into this review now. You could probably tell I got off to quite a distracted start earlier because I have had such a busy, disrupted day. It sometimes happens, but I tell you what, now I'm smelling this whisky, I'm getting nice and centred and in my zone again. I'm sure you'll be pleased to know that. Elemental, intensely peated, aromatic and spicy, a rich malted toffee note, a kind of deep toffee, the sort of toffee that you get in high-end plain chocolates that come in designer boxes that people tend to buy at Christmas time, that sort of toffiness. First taste. Pure peat blast. Very minty. Very savoury. It's got a really quite intense sweet and sour thing going on with the emphasis on the sour rather than the sweet. If you're a peated whisky fan, you're going to love this. You'll love it even more because as soon as you taste it, you can see that it's not from Islay. This is a different type, it's a different style. It's more earthy, it's wonderfully earthy. If there was one Islay distillery I would compare it to, it would be a young Caol Ila. But this has got more rich, compressed spiciness. It's got more toffee notes. It's more raisiny. There's a little bit of sherry cask influence here. And by the way, it's working wonderfully, wonderfully well. Let's add some water. In fact, it's a Ralphie review, so you know what's going to happen. 58.4%. Heavy phenolic peaty. I'm going to add 4 millilitres. And another 4 millilitres, right, and another 2 millilitres. That's 10 millilitres of water. I have virtually, not quite, but virtually reduced, doubled the volume of the whisky in the glass and reduced the intensity of that phenolics. And I've done so deliberately. And I know that many of you don't approve of that, but never mind. I bought this whisky, I present it as I see fit. It's one of the perks of the job. And, I'm glad I bought it, by the way. And I'm rolling it slowly around the glass and I'm seeing the coat lines, I'm seeing the legs, even after I've added water. Because I'm cutting down the strength of the alcohol. The alcoholic nip is subsiding and the compression of flavours contained within the alcohol is now coming out. There's a slight chlorine note coming off it, but it will dissipate. There's also a briny note, a sea brine. Green mint, fresh mint, pineapple mint, apricot, toffee, raisin, some mild chocolate in the background, so kind of half dark, half light milk chocolate. Whew. Taste. Now that I've diluted it, I can hold it on my tongue without the nip, without the anaesthetic nip of the alcohol itself, because we've turned this from a 58.4% alcohol to almost a 35 or even a 30% alcohol. But the flavour's still locked up. It can't just suddenly disappear. What's happening is it's got nowhere to go because it can't hold on to the alcohol anymore, and therefore it's coming out to meet my nose and meet my palate. This is the great thing about adding water. The length of the experience is wonderful. You get a nice finishing numbness on the palate. Such is the intensity of this young whisky, which I wouldn't put it any more than 6 to 7 years old. But absolutely well worth it. If you like peat. If you don't like peat, do not touch this. Walk away, walk totally away, and never look back. I like peat. I like it when it's young and rounded and very much intact and volatile and elemental. And you get to elemental when you've got less cask influence, less wood influence contributing to the event. So the woodiness in this spirit is minimal. What the casks have been doing is just rounding off the spirit rather than methodically maturing it as it would as a 12-year-old and definitely a 16-year-old and 18-year-old single malt. Taste, back to the taste. An increasingly creamy, almost slightly custardy arrival. The peat tang, very vocal, continues straight in, unchanging into the development, where it mixes with the soft spices, gets quite gingery, some green, minty, bay leaf notes, so the aromatic green vegetal notes, and then it subsides into still, I mean, that intensity of peat, it goes right from the arrival, undiminished, right through to the finish. And so the consistency of that peat delivery really stands out as a feature in this particular malt. And the finish, gingery, peat, tangy, fresh, as I said earlier, elemental. Elemental isn't a flavour note, it's more of a sensation note. It's acknowledging the freshness of the flavour rather than the compounding of the flavour due to maturation. So a wonderful result, a wonderful whisky, and I'm going to finish off with a little bit of information for you. I notice when these bottlings are cropping up at auction, they're going for good prices. So keep your eyes open, malt mates, because the whole whisky boom thing is rounding off at the moment. The bubble's not bursting, but the bubble's not expanding much either, apart from very specific select certain brands. And even them, there's less coming out to feed that, because there's awareness in the whisky industry that people frankly don't have the money, and that actually, yeah, people don't have the money. People are budgeting. So consider when you're buying whiskies like this, have a look at auction, depending where you are and the availability of auctions. It doesn't necessarily have to be whisky auctions, it could be wine auctions with whisky as a component towards the end of the wine auction. These things exist. So am I going to give this as a malt mark? I've particularly enjoyed this. Really enjoyed this. I like elemental peatiness. I don't like peatiness that's been messed about with over time by casks and subdued and castrated peatiness. I like the peatiness that gives you a good slap about the face. So I'm going to give this 85 out of 100. It's a malt mark, and of course it's an integrity malt mark. It's a cask strength whisky, natural colour, unchill filter. So the whole experience has been better delivered because of it. And bear in mind the price in relation to the strength of alcohol makes this a very affordable and good value whisky. There we go, Maltmark. I'm done and dusted here. I hope you're subscribed, by the way, because if you are, you're just going to get the updates, hopefully. Although it's alcohol, you see, and alcohol's wicked and bad, so it gets deprioritised as compared to video games, fashion, entertainment and sports channels. But hey ho, I'm not complaining because I've got good quality viewers. So thank you for watching. So subscribe if you haven't subscribed, and I'll be back shortly with another review, and it'll be an extras, so you get an additional content over and above a specific whisky review. By the clicker means goodbye.